Welcome to the Fantasy Source Baseball Podcast. My name is David A. Arnott, sitting here with Brad Pinkerton, and we are nearing the halfway point. The All-Star game is around the corner. I believe we've already passed the 81-game mark for most teams, if not all of them already. And so if you're looking for trends in the season, now's your chance. You've got a nice round number, though of course the calendar doesn't determine everything. You got a nice round, flat point to look back on and then look forward.
Right, we get to draw the line, see what we've had for the first half, and then move on to the second half.
So in the first half, let's start by setting some context here. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about who you think have been the very best players in the first half, the cream of the crop, guys that you say, all right, you've banked a championship caliber half season out of them. And then we're going to talk about who those guys, you think those guys are going to be in the second half. Of course, for the most part, it's going to be very similar lists.
Yeah, so let's hand out some first half awards here. Most valuable hitter, I think there's not much argument here. Matt Kemp stands out to me. I mean, this guy, midway through June, he had already had a 2020 season, and he predicted at the end of last year, which was a very disappointing year for him, that he was going to go 40-40. And we're watching him zoom toward that mark. So it's going to be fun to see what he does in the second half.
One of the interesting things that fellow Fantasy Source Experts League member Eric Ferreira talked about is that he owns Temp in that league, and he kind of enjoys that the Dodgers are going through a bunch of turmoil right now because steals are one of those things where after a while Kemp could just say, forget it, I'm going for it.
Kemp already has said that.
Well, yes, there you go.
He's swinging for the fences and he's giving himself the green light. I love it.
Who else do you think in the second half might be able to push him for that title of most valuable hitter?
Well, I'm always going to put my money on the power hitters, and that's Jose Bautista leading the league again in home runs, and I think he's got another barrage coming in his bat. So second half, I think Kemp is going to be challenged by Bautista's homers. Adrian Gonzalez, just all-around production there in Boston, and that lineup is tough to deal with. And then Ryan Braun, who has a very similar skill set to Kemp. But I think the way Kemp's going, he seems very determined to get to 40-40. If he does that, he's got to be the top fantasy hitter.
Let's talk about several of the surprises that have been there. The biggest ones that have surprised you, biggest ones that you think or may even be still flying under the radar.
There haven't been that many eye-popping surprises of the first half so far. Now, there are some guys that have given you very good value, picking up off the waiver wire, late-round picks, guys like Melky Cabrera, guys that are doing very well, average where you got them. But the biggest surprise for me is Curtis Granderson's all-around production, not to mention his power. Mm-hmm. He's tied for second in the league with 25 jacks. And if you look at his numbers right now, he's hitting 274, 62 ribbies, 77 runs, and he's got 15 steals. The homers, RBIs, and steals are already above his marks from last year. This is what you expected to get out of Granderson for the entire season. Mm-hmm. This is only the first half numbers we're talking about.
And that's really high batting average for him, too, because previous seasons when he's been exceptionally valuable, his batting average has dragged down his value a bit where it's down around 250.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You're hitting 275. If he can keep that up, that is. But the power, I think, is what's going to fall off the most in the second half.
A couple other people you mentioned here on this list in front of us, Lance Berkman and Asdrubal Cabrera.
Asdrubal is my breakout hitter so far. There's some other decent names on this list, but coming from a shortstop, if you're hitting 292 with 14 home runs, 12 steals at the end of the season, you're probably a breakout candidate. He's doing that before the break.
Now, a guy that I think I mentioned still flying under the radar, if you're in a casual league, you might not realize that a rookie, Danny Espinosa, is having as valuable a season as he's having.
Yeah, and the rookie of the half, Danny Espinosa, it's not even close. All these other prospects, you're talking about the Eric Hosmers, the Mike Moustakas of the world, they got so much play in the preseason.
Really quickly, Mike Moustakas of the world?
Yeah, well, if there is more than one out there, I'm not sure.
No, I'm just saying, like, Mike Moustakas versus Mike Moustakas. I think it's Moustakas is the plural. But anyway,
there you go.
Go on.
But yeah, Danny Espinosa's running away with this award, and he didn't get half the ink that those guys got in the preseason. And you got to love what he's producing as a second baseman. That makes it even better.
Yeah, I mean, 16 home runs, double-digit steals already. You get that kind of production from anyone, be it an outfielder or something. You say this person's easily draftable middle rounds.
Now, the casual observer might not like him because of that 247 average, but it's important to note he's over 300 since late May.
Now, what about the busts, the guys who we thought would be fantasy stalwarts and just have been totally useless?
Yeah, this is always a touchy category because every fantasy owner probably has one on their team, whether it's a first or second round pick who hasn't lived up to expectations, but there's someone that's killing them on their team, and they have a strong determination to make sure it's that guy. But for me, I tend to push aside the guys who have been held back by injuries. If that's their excuse, fine, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Adam Dunn, to me, does not have an excuse. There's no injury. He's in a great setup, and great ballpark, nice lineup. He's hitting 166, 8 home runs, and 32 ribbies. Not exactly what we were expecting.
110 strikeouts.
110 strikeouts. He has 2 hits against left-handers and 57 at-bats, 2 hits against left-handers. And we're looking at that ballpark and that lineup, how he's going to thrive in Chicago. He's hitting 131 at home.
I mean, I think he was the odds-on favorite before the season of everybody in Major League Baseball to get at least 40 home runs.
Yeah. Oh, he's a lock every year, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that lock has been broken.
Now, I see you also have listed among the guys who have been disappointing this year, Dan Udla, Justin Morneau, Alex Rios. You list Hanley Ramirez, Shin-Soo Choo.
Right.
I mean, are those guys? I understand they've been disappointing, but do you think that they're really that a top draft pick like that performs as they have is as disappointing as, say, someone who gives you absolutely nothing like Dunn has, even though he may have been drafted a little bit later?
Well, that group you mentioned, Ugla, is starting to show signs of life. So he has a chance to turn things around, and Dunn does too. Dunn's a smart bet to say that he's going to bounce back with his power in the second half, but he's just not showing any signs of life right now. Morneau, of course, with the neck injury now, his return is even questionable, so who knows what you're going to get out of him. He has the injury excuse, I guess, but that extends all the way back to last year's concussion. Hanley has a bit of an injury excuse, but he's been the biggest first-round bust to this point, I would say. And, of course, Chu also trying to battle back from a wrist injury, so that's what you're dealing with. But Alex Rios, also no excuse. He's right there in the same boat as Dunn, as the biggest bust just from being on the field.
Now, let's go over the top 5 guys that you have listed that you think are going to be the best hitters going over the second half. The top 5 guys, who are they and why do you think they're going to be there? And maybe they've been as good in the first half, but maybe not.
Well, and before we get into this, let's say that there is no draft strategy taken into consideration here. So don't worry about position scarcity or anything like that, or any team needs it. But the overall most valuable hitter, I think, in the second half is going to be Jose Bautista, and that goes back to the power theory. I mean, the guy's going to crush 20 to 30 jacks in the second half. It's going to be tough to beat him with those numbers. But right behind him, just all-around production, Adrian Gonzalez. He's my number 2 guy. With that Red Sox lineup, that's runs, that's RBIs. You know he's going to hit for a high average, and the power is always going to be there. So again, he's going to be nipping at Jose's heels if Bautista doesn't, if he goes into another power slump like he did midway through the first half. But then you got number 3, Matt Kemp. I think he's going to be there by the end of the year. The only concern you have with him is a dip in power. Just playing so many games at Dodger Stadium, you wonder if it's going to catch up with him. He hasn't seemed to mind so far this year, but we'll see if he can get to that 40-40 mark. And then Ryan Braun's right behind him, again, like I said, with the same sort of stats. And then the number 5 guy, I think we're going to see kind of a resurgence in the second half from Joey Votto. He's too good of a hitter. His numbers to this point are slightly disappointing, and I still think we haven't seen the best yet. So we still have an MVP candidate waiting to wake up.
Now, the 2 most obvious people that have been left out of your top 5, I would say, why wouldn't you put Albert Pujols or Jose Reyes up there?
Well, injuries, obviously.
Yeah, those are huge.
Now, Pujols is quote-unquote healed and back from a broken wrist.
But nobody really believes that, right?
Well,
is he still wearing a cast?
If you can believe Pujols is even capable of getting hurt to begin with.
Right, that's true.
But he's going to be playing for the next few weeks with a broken wrist, not to mention the cast. So it's going to be tough to say that he's going to finish in the top 5 or even top 10, even top 15 fantasy hitters in the second half with that ailment. The same theory applies to Jose Reyes. Now he's got a bum hamstring. Suddenly the news is he's going to miss 3 more weeks, might be out all of July. So then what are you really getting in the second half? Is he going to take it easy, playing for that big free agent contract? You just don't know now.
Okay, so as if I understand it, we've got a bias towards power to begin with. But with Jose Reyes specifically, I tend to agree with you on him that the vast majority of his of his value comes from his explosiveness, his speed, his all the triples he's been hitting. If he doesn't have that explosiveness, he becomes fairly ordinary.
Yep, and he has a long injury history, including hamstrings.
All right, and what couple other guys that you would say that you think might surprise us in this second half in being even better than they've been before, or perhaps that haven't been quite up to snuff in the first half?
Well, the guys I think that are going to bounce back. I'll give you the rest of my top 10 for the second half. Is Carlos Gonzalez. He had an up and down first half, but he's on a very high note going into the All-Star break. So I think he's going to be fine second half. Follow that up with Miguel Cabrera. He's steady. He's always there. Curtis Granderson, of course, as long as he keeps that power up.
So you think Granderson's definitely for real this year?
Yes, this is what I expected Granderson to do last year, but he had a couple of mechanical flaws and everything that held him back, and I think he's got all those fixed, so we'll see if he can keep doing it. And then number 9, the guy that I think is going to bounce back, Hanley Ramirez, he's starting to thaw out. He's looking better, so I think he's on the right track, and he could be in for a big second half. And another guy that a lot of people have felt like they've been let down by, especially Red Sox Nation, Carl Crawford. He's healing. He has his early season jitters of debuting in front of the Boston faithful. He's got that out of the way. I think he's ready to relax and have some big second half stats.
All right, Brad. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot.